So Diamond are trying to take books that they never paid for, sell them, and then take the proceeds themselves.
It's catastrophic. And some of these companies kept providing product to Diamond, and they just had to sit there and take it while he dragged his nuts across their face because they didn't have any way to push back against him because the guy had a monopoly.
Following the bankruptcy of Diamond Comics, we're starting to see the dominoes fall, people really getting hurt and screwed over by this, and it feels like Diamond Comics are out there trying to screw everybody over, Aaron. Doesn't matter if you're a retailer, if you're a publisher, if you're a customer, they're basically going out there and breaking everything that they can on their way out the door.
Absolutely, because why maintain those relationships? Why would you expect anything less from a POS like Steve Geppi? This is a guy who allegedly funneled money from Gladstone and to build his family museum, praising himself. I don't know why you would expect that this guy would be honorable on the way out the door. I've heard tales of inventory being trapped at their warehouse that the distributors are trying, the people that provided him with that inventory, the comic companies, the game manufacturers, the toy companies are trying to get back. And Diamond is basically saying, oh no, this is abandoned product. And they're selling it out the door, to Ollie's or Ross or whoever it is that they can get to come in and buy it. And none of that money is going to repay their debt. All that money is, the comic companies are not going to see it. The toy companies are not going to see it. The game companies are not going to see it. And I would be surprised if Geppi didn't find a way to take a chunk of stuff out the door with him when he leaves.
Dynamite Entertainment has filed an emergency motion in the Diamond Comic Distributors bankruptcy case, seeking an expedited hearing to recover more than $1 million in unpaid funds. According to court documents, the publisher is facing an immediate cash flow crisis and warned that it will be unable to meet its payroll obligations without swift court intervention. The filing emphasizes the urgency of the situation, stating that the delay in payment from Diamond has placed the company in a precarious financial position. Dynamite is requesting that the court compel Diamond to release the funds or authorize immediate relief to prevent further operational disruption. And apparently, if Dynamite do not get their $1 million, at least a portion of it, they will not be able to meet their payroll obligations next month. I know that Dynamite are obviously the first ones to file these motions and go to court over it, but they will not be the last. I've been hearing lots of different stories behind the scenes, people talking to some of these companies about their, financial wellness, inquiring about, how things are going. And almost every single small publisher out there, except for just a couple that I know of, are basically upside down financially, where they are owing way more money to banks and investors than they actually are bringing in at this point. And Dynamite is going to be just like the first domino to fall when it comes to them not paying out money and finally going bankrupt because they have so much inventory tied up in Diamond Comics.
It's really alarming to think that any company had that much, just like $1 million. I know that that's small compared to what some of these companies have tied up in Diamond. It's catastrophic. And some of these companies kept providing product to Diamond. It's as soon as you heard that Diamond was filing for bankruptcy, you should have cut off all shipments to that company. That should have been it. The moment that you had a chance to get out of your contract, the moment that they breached in any way, you should have jumped out of that contract, or you should have just broken it. And then, hey, let them sue you. They're not coming out of. We knew that there was very little chance that they were going to come out of this. Slim to none. The best case scenario was that someone was going to buy them, and but we couldn't think of anybody that would see any benefit to buying them, although a couple people tried. And Diamond screwed that up.
100% they did, and there are a lot of retailers being screwed over. So many of them reporting back that their comic books that they've ordered are not showing up on time, if at all. Also, they're demanding different types of payment now, like pay before they even ship it out. And it's really screwed up and put an enormous wrench into the entire distribution issues going on with comic books today.
What do you do at that point? Like, I would never prepay for anything from Diamond, especially in this. I wouldn't have done that when they were, quote unquote, a healthy company. I never would have prepaid for anything. You cannot trust them. You couldn't trust that you were going to get your product when you were a weekly customer with them. You couldn't trust that the product wasn't going to arrive severely damaged.
Yeah, it's wild just what a disorganized company that was. And I'm not surprised that they weren't able to survive through the new distributors coming online. But things are getting worse, especially for some small publishers out there. Diamond Comic Distributors has submitted a motion requesting permission to liquidate inventory held on consignment, stock that it has not paid for and does not own. This includes books and merchandise supplied by publishers under agreements that explicitly retain publisher ownership until the product is sold. The proposal has drawn sharp criticism from several affected parties. Fantagraphics co-publisher Eric Reynolds referred to the move as an attempt to offload hostage inventory, arguing that Diamond is seeking to monetize publisher-owned goods to cover its own debts. The motion is now under court consideration, with publishers pushing for the return of their unsold property. So Diamond are trying to take books that they never paid for, sell them, and then take the proceeds themselves.
Yeah. Why does that surprise you? Jeppy has always been a pirate.
That's absolutely nasty stuff. I can't believe any company in good conscience or good faith could do that. And Steve Jeppy has to know that he's putting a lot of these publishers at risk. He already owes them a ton of money that he likely is trying to never pay them back. And now he won't give them their products so they could sell it themselves? Like, how many times can this guy fuck these guys over?
Yeah, well, I mean, he'll always try to find a new way. Steve Jeppy doesn't care about anything but himself at this point, if he ever cared about anything but himself. I mean, look, the guy tried to build a museum to his greatness. That tells you everything you need to know about this guy. Do you remember coming out of COVID? Our comeback will be stronger than our setback. Do you remember that? And yes. You had all those. Do you remember the video? He went on a very small channel, like they always do, because for some reason they're allergic to larger channels because they might actually be challenged. But they went on some small channel with all of the different publishers. You know, you had Ross Ritchie there, you had Nick Barucci there, you know, all these guys. And Steve Jeppy basically BTFO'd all of them and acted like a mob boss to all of these publishers. And they just had to sit there and take it while he dragged his nuts across their face because they didn't have any way to push back against him because the guy had a monopoly. Now, granted, you had Lunar running at that point, but they didn't know what to do. They were too afraid. They were too cowardly to stand up to this guy and just say, you know what, we're pulling our stuff and we're moving the way that DC did. Remember Eric Stevenson saying that the move of DC leaving Diamond and going to Lunar was psychopathic? Sociopathic. Yeah. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That's they were all terrified. They were all just terrified about anything changing.
I don't think a lot of these smaller publishers actually had a choice if Penguin Random House wouldn't take them on board, and they took very few companies, and Lunar didn't bring them on board, and they're being pretty selective. If you're Fantagraphics or if you're a Black Mask studio or whatever, you probably had zero choice if you wanted nationwide distribution other than working with Diamond continuing. But I don't think many people probably could have imagined that they would take their product that they warehouse on consignment and then start selling it out the back door as if they own it themselves.
You probably should have. Like, you should probably just assume the worst. When you're working with people like Jeppy, you should know that there is no low to which he will not sink. The moment that Diamond was no longer a monopoly, the writing was on the wall. Because a business as poorly run, as incompetent, and as predatory as Diamond Comics distributors, the only place that a business like that could succeed is in a monopoly.
When you likened it to like the mob or, you know, organized crime or whatever, and certainly there's plenty of stories of having dresses and selling them out the back of the store at a discount, you know, because the mob had partial ownership of a store or something like that. And that is kind of what's going on here. It's very gross.
Remember, this is a company that let $1 million a year account walk out the door because they didn't have any sales rep except one to deal with that account. And that sales rep was an arrogant piece of shit because Diamond was a monopoly and they thought that they could just walk all over anybody and they didn't have to treat their customers well. And this, you know, this shop owner that I worked for said, you know what? I have other distributors. I don't need to carry comics. I can buy everything that you sell through other channels. I'm going to walk away. I'll stick with you because, you know, it's convenient if you give me another rep, but I will not work with this person. And they refused to do it. They let $1 million account walk out the door. And if they were doing that semi-regularly, it's no wonder that they failed. But that's the kind of arrogance that this company had.
As far as retailers and customers, it gets even worse. Diamond has officially shut down the ComicSuite and Pullbox, two key digital tools relied upon by comic book retailers across the country. ComicSuite, a point-of-sale integration developed in partnership with Microsoft Retail Management System, allowed stores to manage subscriptions, place orders, and track inventory. Pullbox, its customer-facing counterpart, enabled pre-order management and streamlined communication between retailers and subscribers. The sudden discontinuation of both services has left many retailers scrambling to find alternatives. Without these tools, shops are being forced to adapt quickly, either by adopting new systems or falling back on manual processes. at a time when the market is already under significant strain. And we did just hear from a couple of comic book retailers on the Mark Miller Miller Time podcast on his YouTube channel. And they were talking about a lot of retailers kind of wanting to step away, don't want to be in the industry anymore. Things have changed too much. And I imagine this is just another straw that broke the camel's back, allowing people or encouraging them that maybe giving up on the comic book industry is the right move.
I know that we're supposed to believe that like there's this huge wave of TikTok kids that are going into comics, all comic shops, all excited, but that is not what I'm hearing from retailers. I'm hearing that there's a little bit of mild like interest in Marvel Rivals and some things like that younger people are interested in. But by and large, the comic book customers that are coming in are the same customers that have been comic book customers, and maybe they're just increasing the amount that they buy a little bit. And when you think about the 48,000 number, ASM selling 48,000, how much of that is multiple copies to the same store? Because there's variants, because there's how much is it? How many of those issues are actually ending up in end users' hands? How many people are collecting? How many people are reading? These numbers are unsustainable.
Certainly for Marvel's end, although it does appear that DC is doing better. But I don't know how many of these setbacks the industry can really suffer right now, as it appears there is momentum powered by the Absolute Universe, but there's also all these other dominoes falling around it where distribution has been broken up and fragmented. You have comic book stores closing down because they don't want to deal with all this nonsense anymore. We have inventory being sold out the back door by Diamond Comics and publishers not getting their payment. Publishers still waiting on monies owed that are on the books that are never going to get that, not being able to make payroll. It is a lot of bad stuff coming around, and you do have that one great thing happening with Absolute Universe driving some sales increases, but there's a lot of other smoke all around it. Yeah,
it's actually a really bad time for comics, which it seems like every year we're saying like it's a really bad time for comics, but these things keep happening and things keep looking substantially worse. I mean, even if every comic on the shelf right now was worth reading, that still doesn't make the industry healthy. It's in a very bad place just in various other ways, even if it were strong creatively.
They're going out of their way to fuck over everybody that stood behind them, for the past 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, they are not in any way conducting themselves as an honest business. If at the very least you should be like, hey, look, we can't pay you, but we've got this inventory. Come and get your inventory, or we'll ship your inventory out to you. Even if it's like you have to give us a credit card to pay for the shipment because we can't afford it. Like whatever it is that you have to do, you should be trying to return that inventory to the people that you took it from, that you have not paid for that inventory.
If you appreciate this conversation, would like more of the Geek Fix, because this is just a small portion of an amazing podcast that we do every single Wednesday on Think Critical Patreon, that is the place to be. The Sparrow's Never Ending Christmas Tree tier, there's a link in the video description. Hope to see you there very soon, because Aaron and I are going to be talking about movies, television, comic books, video games for another 2 hours.